Everyone is talking about the documentary Game Changers, but after watching the documentary and many others that are like it, I found that we're actually asking completely the wrong question when it comes to health and wellness. And this is a big one, so I'm going to be covering that in today's video. Alright guys, if you're new to my channel and you don't know who I am, my name's Autumn and I'm a certified clinical nutritionist with my master's nutrition and human performance. On my channel, I'm typically talking about the science-backed and holistic methods that you can use in order to feel amazing again, and part of that is making sure that you're following the right advice and asking the right questions. And to air out my own biases, I was actually a vegetarian for roughly the first 10 years of my life. I was also vegan for a period of time in college, and to this day I still make mostly plant-based foods purely because I enjoy it. Now, a lot of these types of films are largely asking a question of meat or plants. That's generally the overarching message is, should you be eating meat or should you only be eating plants? And Game Changers backs up their claim to show that there's plenty of athletes that are using a plant-based diet and still achieving their performance goals. Now, these are anecdotal, but it still gets the message across. You can use plants in order to achieve your performance goals. The film also discusses heart disease and cancer when it comes to a plant-based diet. Now, the point that it brings up is that plants help to lower your risk of getting cardiovascular disease, or rather lowers the markers that could cause you to get cardiovascular disease, like LDL cholesterol. Also, because inherently a vegan diet or a plant-based diet is going to be much lower in saturated fats, it's also going to help to reduce your risk of heart disease. Now, on cancer, it talks about how meat has been found to have things like TMAOs, or rather compounds that form TMAs that then form TMAOs within the body in order to increase your risk of cancer. And if you were to leave it right there, then you would be led to the assumption that plants or plant-based diet is going to be the thing that helps stop heart disease and cancer. But it's not that simple, because you can actually turn these claims around and find evidence that proves exactly opposite of what those claims were as well. Now, going back to the athletic performance, Game Changers brings up a study where it says that as long as the proteins are equivalent or an equivalent amount, that you can actually use a plant-based or an animal-based protein and achieve the same results. However, in that same study, it also states that those who are vegetarian have lower concentrations of creatine, which is a massively important fuel source for any type of explosive type of activities like sprinting or powerlifting. And regarding heart health, multiple massive meta-analysis on saturated fat and heart disease actually found that saturated fat intake has zero correlation between getting coronary heart disease, cardiovascular disease, or even stroke. I'm going to link both of those meta-analysis below so that you guys can check it out. And as we know, animal-based products are the most rich source of saturated fat, putting coconut oil to the side. And then with cancer, there's this really interesting phenomenon called the Warburg Effect, and it actually explains how cancer cells can grow so quickly. Because unlike almost any other cell within the body, cancer cells grow at an alarming rate. That's what makes them so dangerous. And the Warburg Effect explains that cancer cells can grow so quickly because it uses carbohydrates as its main fuel source. Now, the Warburg Effect explains that in order to grow at that crazy rate, carbohydrates are the necessary fuel source, which animal-based products are essentially void of. We've talked on this channel before about how glucose, or that simple form of carbohydrate, is a really fast-burning source of fuel. It's very easy to convert into energy, which makes sense for why cancer would favor it, because it needs to be able to burn fuel quickly so that it can grow fast. So the question comes, how can we possibly prove both of these sides as right? If both sides can be proved right based off of this question, then maybe we're asking the wrong question. Maybe it's not plants versus meat, maybe it's something else. Because we have seen that there are healthy vegans as well as healthy omnivores, as well as unhealthy vegans and unhealthy omnivores. We see that there are vegans and omnivores alike that are dying from things like heart disease and cancer. And clearly from this film, we've also seen that athletes can thrive on both of these types of diets. So the question comes in, what question should we be asking then? Now, maybe, just maybe, we should be looking at what we have very recently introduced into our human history of food intake. And one of the most massive shifts that we've made when it comes to nutrition over the course of the past 100 to 150 years, when all of these diseases started to skyrocket, is the massive intake of refined carbohydrates and sugar. Now, with this question in place of whether or not it's refined carbohydrates and sugar that causes these problems, this can answer why there's healthy vegans and unhealthy vegans, or healthy omnivores and unhealthy omnivores, because both can eat refined carbohydrates and sugar. Now let's take a look back at those two health concerns of cancer and heart disease. One of the leading biomarkers that doctors will track when it comes to heart disease risk is triglycerides. And increased triglycerides is typically seen from an increase in carbohydrate intake. It's from the conversion of the carbohydrates from your meals into your blood supply, converting into fat that forms those triglycerides. And with such a dense source of those refined carbohydrates, we're getting a lot more of those those carbohydrates than from something like a sweet potato, you're going to have a bigger impact on your triglycerides. Now, diabetes is also considered a really strong factor when it comes to your heart disease risk, and eating a higher amount of sugar and refined carbohydrates can lead to a massive spike in your blood glucose and a massive spike in your insulin. And if you were to keep this up by every day having refined carbohydrates or sugar, like let's say in a vanilla latte or highly refined breads and pastas, this done consistently can lead to something called hyperinsulinemia as well as insulin resistance, and kept up leads to type 2 diabetes. Now, regarding cancer, with the essential factor of how cancer cells actually grow, remember the Warburg effect, and requiring large amounts of carbohydrates in order to maintain that growth, there is no better source of that than refined carbohydrates and sugar. Just in general, these refined carbs and sugar are going to be so much more dense in glucose than any other whole food form. This explains why with a vegan diet, where if you are eating those whole sources of food, you can feel so great because it's not such a dense source of carbohydrates. But when you start to refine it and you strip it down of the nutrients and the fiber that makes those plants so great, that's when a lot of these issues can arise. Especially because these food products that are so refined or so sugar packed cause us to crave even more of those same products. If only one of those two possibilities were the solution, eating just plants or eating plants plus meat, then we wouldn't see healthy people on both sides, and we wouldn't see those suffering from heart disease and cancer on both sides either. I'm not saying that one is better than the other, rather that we're focusing on the wrong thing. Guys, make sure you check out my other diet reviews right here. Also, if you're new to my channel and you love the science-backed information, make sure you subscribe right here. Come out with new videos every Tuesday and Thursday. Alright guys, thanks so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in my next video.